Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, no watches, warnings, or advisories out for southern Alaska, the Panhandle, or the Alaska Peninsula. But there is a winter weather advisory out for the southeastern Brooks Range, and this is east of the Dalton Highway. And the time frame on it is from 10 p.m. this evening until 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, and that's for possibly 4 to 8 inches of snow falling east of the Dalton Highway there in the southeastern Brooks Range. Along the highway itself, looking for less than 2 inches overnight tonight. So the heavy is definitely off to the east, and then lighter as you head west. And then again, that ends by early tomorrow morning. And from there, no watches, warnings, or advisories out for the southwest part of the state or the Bering Sea or the Aleutians. Satellite imagery showing a pretty active front extending from Kodiak Island, pushing northward toward the North Gulf Coast and in toward the southeast coast, with the main low center farther back to the south. But front is strong enough, bringing storm force winds today to the North Gulf Coast areas, and storm force winds edging into the coastal areas of the southeast coast as well this afternoon. Winds come up to gusting 40 miles an hour, a little higher, both at Cape Decision and at Sitka this afternoon, with a couple of buoys having 50 knot plus gusts there in the coastal zones. Otherwise, rain fell across with that front, about a third of an inch at Yakutat and Cordova today. Kodiak picked up over 2 inches of rain, 2¼ inches the last 24 hours from that system. And also winds pretty brisk with that. As I mentioned, storm force winds gust over 60 miles an hour at Middleton Island. Kenai had gusts to 40 miles an hour this afternoon out of the northeast, and Seward reporting gusts about 30 to 35 miles an hour as well. And again, those winds also coming up, as I mentioned, along the southeast coast. Still pretty breezy, but a lot of sunshine, as you can see over Bristol Bay. But winds 30 to 35 miles an hour this afternoon out of the north-northwest across that area, with gusts near 40 at Cape Newenham and over back toward Cold Bay. But those winds starting to gradually come down. Still some clouds and a few showers from the eastern Aleutians up toward the Pribilofs. And get a little more general cloud coverage as you head up to the northern Bering Sea there. And then, but that clear swath extends all the way up along the Yukon-Kuskokwim River valleys, right up over to the eastern border there. Arctic Village seeing some clearing today. But a front approaching from the west there, bringing some mixed light precipitation into the Arctic coast and North Slope areas. Otherwise, back to the west, clearing with high pressure over the western Bering Sea, and between that high and the low in the Gulf or the Northeast Pacific there, quite a gradient of that northerly flow, and that bringing surges of moisture, not really heavy, on with it on southward, riding in on those northerly and northwest winds that increase, as you can see, with a tighter gradient over the Alaska Peninsula. Even tighter, sustained northeast 40-knot winds in Shelikof Strait today, and gusts to about 40 miles an hour at Augustine Island, and 40 to 50 miles an hour in the Barren Islands. The strongest winds, again, along the North Gulf Coast, and those strong winds pushing in toward the southeast coast. Otherwise, there's that system with the front up to the north there, kind of dragging across the Arctic coast. Really not much, the rain precipitation pretty light with that so far. Water equivalent to anywhere from 1/100 of an inch to maybe 1/10 or 1/1500 in the last 24 hours, and winds about 20 to 25 miles an hour with that system. Tonight, that'll drop a little bit farther to the south, and again, the winter weather advisory, southeastern Brooks Range, for possibly as much as 4 to 8 inches of snow, lighter amounts, and again, that's east of the Dalton Highway, much lighter amounts to the west. Scattered rain and snow showers along the Arctic coast, probably just will be in the form of wet snow on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, but again, amounts not too terribly heavy with this. Otherwise, that front edges in, and that kicks the gales up along the southeast coast with rain, moderate to heavy at times along the south coast there, lighter and more showery up toward the north, and rain along the North Gulf Coast. Some of that tries to spill into, or continues to try to spill into northern Cook Inlet and the Madanuska Valley, with just scattered isolated showers up toward the central Alaska range, and then periods of rain down southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, and diminishing rain and wind for Kodiak Island, slowly tapering off. And it stays breezy over the Alaska Peninsula, dry from Togiak Bay into the Yukon-Kuskokwim River Valley areas, and then the central interior, pretty dry conditions. And for Wednesday, look for that front, kind of another system there kind of hung up on the southeast coast, with Thursday's weather looking yet still another low pressure area there along the southern coast of the Panhandle. That'll be where the heaviest rainfall amounts will be. Up to the north, snow along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, light snow with snow showers into the Brooks Range, and some rain showers over southern Alaska. Low temperatures for tonight, mid to upper 20s, Arctic coast, north slope to the Brooks Range, upper 20s to lower 30s of Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley areas, otherwise 40s over southern Alaska and the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow, 55 to 62 for the southeast coast, and mid to upper 50s south central Alaska, mid 50s Kodiak Island, mid to upper 40s in the Tanana Valley, and upper 20s for Anaktuvuk Pass, and right around the freeze point on up to the Arctic coast, and highs in the mid to upper 40s for the Aleutians and Bering Sea, right around 40 St. Lawrence Island, followed by lows the following morning on Thursday morning, mid 20s for the Arctic coast, and maybe into the teens over the north slope to the Brooks Range, and back into the 20s along the Brooks Range and southward. Otherwise 40s, well above freezing for southern Alaska and the Panhandle, followed by highs 50s over southern Alaska, lower 30s along the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather, Wednesday morning, we've got IFR, Brooks Range across the eastern North Slope and Arctic coast, marginal VFR from the Brooks Range on the west side northward, and then some VFR there from Kobuk, Selawik Valley areas, Kotzebue Sound southward along all of the west coast and the Seward Peninsula, Nunivak Island, even the Pribilofs in the VFR zone, as well as the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. Quite an area of IFR from Kodiak Island into southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, and across a good portion of the Kenai Peninsula, on up into Prince William Sound, possibly as far north as the Talkeetnas, and then solid IFR along the North Gulf Coast and Panhandle. For the afternoon, not much change to that pattern. Stays pretty well entrenched, or the IFR stays about the same throughout the day there for the North Gulf Coast and the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound area, and the Panhandle. VFR, northern Cook Inlets, the Sitna Valley, and possibly the Copper River Basin area as well, and a more general area of VFR from the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Pribilofs, right up along the west coast there into till you hit the Brooks Range, and that VFR zone expands into the Koyukuk Valley, with marginal VFR for the north slope from the Brooks Range and the north slope to the Arctic coast, IFR western St. Lawrence Island, and then some IFR just coming up into the central and western Aleutians, otherwise marginal. And for the morning Thursday, we've got IFR over the northern Bering Sea and another batch there over the western Aleutians, with the VFR zone trying to hold on there for the Alaska Peninsula, southeast Bering Sea, but IFR overspreading the Pribilofs and Nunivak Island area as well as St. Lawrence Island, but VFR right up the Yukon-Kuskokwim River valleys until you get about to the central interior. Then you pick up the marginal area that becomes IFR over the east side. So it looks like from about the Alaska Range, northern Copper River Basin, north of Cantwell through the Denali Park area and the pass, into the Tanana Valley, northward to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and IFR hanging on to the eastern Kenai Peninsula, Montague Island, otherwise marginal VFR, Prince William Sound, on down the southeast coast, and southern Kodiak Island, or most of Kodiak Island, Fognak Island VFR, Bristol Bay marginal. And for the afternoon Thursday, again VFR over the west central interior, not bad over Cook Inlet, some VFR, otherwise IFR just to our east, into the Talkeetnas and western Copper River Basin, on up into the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, marginal for the eastern Copper River Basin, marginal for the Panhandle, IFR staying off the coast the way it looks at this point in time, and IFR for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast down across the eastern North Slope to the Brooks Range, IFR St. Lawrence Island and western Bering Sea and Aleutians. Passes tomorrow, both Anaktuvuk and Adigan starting out IFR and then becoming marginal probably by midday. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, occasional marginal VFR pretty much sums it up for both of those passes, as well as rainy, marginal VFR at times, could be VFR at other times. And windy, looks like marginal VFR might trend toward IFR conditions in the afternoon, while Isabel looks marginal. And Tanita, VFR, possible marginal VFR in the eastern entrance, and otherwise for Mentasta, marginal. And for Portage, marginal VFR with IFR in the eastern entrance. Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, Wednesday morning, 2,000 feet along the south coast of Norton Sound, south of St. Lawrence Island, extending northeastward, and then about 6,000 to 8,000 feet over the Panhandle, and 4,000 for the Aleutians. Icing, pretty good area coming into the southern southeast coast. Could see some considerable moderate rime icing, otherwise isolated moderate for the most part up along the North Gulf Coast and along the Kenai Peninsula. And the jet stream, showing good jet along and just south of the Aleutians there, about 70 to 60, 70 knots along the Aleutians, and 70 knots up over the northeast interior and the Panhandle. 3,000 or 9,000 feet south to southeast, 30 to 45 knots for the southeast coast, north to northwest, 25 to 30 across the Alaska Peninsula, and 3,000 feet. Pretty light winds up over the northern and eastern interior. Northerlies, though, still about 40 knots coming out of along the southwest coast there across the Alaska Peninsula, and 40 to 55 knot winds over the North Gulf Coast and off the north coast of the Panhandle. Turbulence, occasional moderate chop, southeast coast, North Gulf Coast, and the Alaska Peninsula, and the southwest interior.
Here at the end of the Earth, it still feels like a place for raw exploration and adventure. It's vast in all directions and ground zero for some of the biggest questions we have about the climate. But when we decided to make a series about the frozen places on Earth, we knew there would be one hurdle we would need to jump over first. What is the cryosphere?
The what?
Ooh.
I have no idea.
While I'm aware of the cryosphere, I don't actually know what it is.
It has something to do with ice. All right, that's all I got.
How do you get people acquainted with the cryosphere when most of us don't even know what it is?
Hey, so here we are in Washington, D.C., standing on the roof of NASA headquarters. That's the Capitol building right behind me. And what headquarters does is kind of serve as the focal point to connect the dots.
That's Dr. Tom Wagner, NASA's cryospheric program scientist at headquarters. In short, Tom is responsible for making sure NASA knows what the current status of the cryosphere is.
The cryosphere is everything from the snow that falls by your house to the icy reaches of the Himalayas, to the big ice sheets of Antarctica all the way at the South Pole, and also the frozen ground of the Arctic, and even some of that frozen ground that's currently under the ocean.
If you had to break it down, you'd have a mix of sea ice, snow cover, permafrost, ice sheets, and glaciers.
Right now, our best predictions are that sea levels will rise anywhere from 1 to 3 feet within the next 100 years. 3 feet of sea level rise has the potential to displace about 100 million people, which is a lot of people that need to find new homes.
Our current reality places us at a near tipping point, and the cryosphere is playing a huge part in that delicate balance.
So one of the things people don't know about NASA is that we study the Earth, and we've been doing that since NASA's inception back in the 1950s. And we study the frozen part of the Earth in a variety of ways.
Missions like SNOWX, Airborne Snow Observatory, Oceans Melting Greenland, Operation Icebridge, Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, and countless other labs and individual researchers stand at the forefront of monitoring the cryosphere. But this year was a particularly big year.
3, 2, 1.
liftoff of Grace Follow-On, continuing the legacy of the Grace mission of tracking the movement of water across our planet.
2 state-of-the-art satellite missions are being launched in a single year as part of a major attempt to understand Earth's frozen places. Our scientists are answering hard questions, sharing stories from the field, and giving their best predictions for what we can expect of a warming world. We're taking you with us as we follow NASA explorers on their journey to the frozen ends of the Earth as they study our rapidly changing world from satellites, planes, and boots on the ground.
What we can do really well from orbit is we can tell when a surface of land is covered in snow. What's tricky is though, how thick is that snow? And it's even trickier how much water is in that snow.
What we think of snow depends a lot on where it falls. If you live in the eastern US, maybe it's fun. Or maybe it's just a pain.
But if you live in parts of the world where they depend on the water that's in the snow for a large fraction of their total water that they use for drinking, for agriculture, for industry, for hydropower, the snow is a very important natural resource. For example, in the western part of the United States, 80 to 90% of their renewable water comes from snow.
Snow is one part of the cryosphere that many of us have actually encountered before, but it also plays a critical role in regulating the Earth's climate. Through decades of remote sensing, NASA has kept a close eye on the ebb and flow of snow cover.
We now have a 52-year record of snow cover in the Northern Hemisphere, and we can see changes in the extent of snow cover over the time period, particularly in the last few decades, where we can see that the snow cover has been retreating. It's been melting a lot earlier in the springtime.
The extent is relatively easy to do, and it has been done over the years. What's tricky is though, how thick is that snow? And it's even trickier how much water is in that snow.
That tricky part is known as the snow water equivalent, or how much water would actually be in a layer of snow if it melted. NASA and its partners have taken to the air to help solve this elusive mystery. First, there's the Airborne Snow Observatory, or ASO, a small plane outfitted with a couple of instruments, one of which measures snow depth using LiDAR. LiDAR measures distance using light from lasers. Since 2014, ASO has flown over basins in California and Colorado, taking before and after looks at snow depth. Scientists subtract the snow-free summer data from the snow-on winter data to get an idea of the snow depth. There's no single way to measure all types of snow across the globe, and so NASA's other airborne campaign, SnowX, is testing different combinations of sensors. This winter, SnowX will test a new instrument, the Snow Water Equivalent Synthetic Aperture Radar and Radiometer, or SWISAR.
SWISAR consists of 2 main components, one of them being the radar and the second one being the radiometer.
So with the radar providing the depth of the snow and the radiometer providing the density of the snow, we could put those 2 things together and get the snow water equivalent. Here in the chamber, we're going to measure different radiation patterns at our different frequencies and do some full system testing in this chamber. This chamber kind of enables us to isolate various types of radiation and interference. And in about a month, we're going to take the instrument, mount it on a Twin Otter in the Grand Mesa in Colorado, and we're going to fly it over the Grand Mesa and take various different measurements. This is what we call our engineering flight.
Making sure the sensors are calibrated is key in order to face the challenges nature will throw at them.
Half of the area that gets covered by snow every winter contains trees and forest. And the trees make it difficult for the sensors to see the snow that's underneath the trees, so it makes it difficult for us to measure how much snow there is. After the snow's had a chance to sit on the ground for a while, it gets denser and denser and denser over time, and it changes, which is another reason why snow is very challenging to remotely sense. It doesn't stay the same, it's constantly changing. One of the things that we often do in the field is go dig what we call a snow pit. We literally dig a pit in the snow so we can see all the different layers. The layering is very important.
All this digging is part of ground truthing SNOWX, a way of matching up what the airborne instruments see and what is actually sitting on the surface. The ultimate goal of SNOWX is to figure out what the best combination of instruments would be for a future satellite mission in order to get a global picture of snow.
We need to know how much snow is in a snowpack, because if we have too much snow and the snow melts too fast, then you can get flooding. And if you don't have enough snow, or if the snow melts too early, that can lead to a longer wildfire season, a more intense drought, and we need to know these things for water resource planning.
After we had a record that was about 15, 20 years long, we started noticing that the extent of the ice in the Arctic was getting smaller over time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the sea ice analysis today, not a lot different from yesterday. It looks like it drifted maybe a little farther to the south over there northwest of Mackenzie Bay and right off the extreme eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And with the northeast flow over the next few days, that ice fields may probably track southwestward to a certain extent, but won't reach the coastline. Moving on to coastal water forecasts, we've got let's see. There we go. Small craft advisories tomorrow on the south coast. Gale warnings on the north coast. 25-knot winds for the southern southeast coast of 12-foot seas, and then 35 to 40-knot winds on the north coast, 16-foot seas there. Clarence Strait also looking at small craft advisories. Southeast winds 25 knots with 5-foot seas. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, north at 20. Stevens Passage, northeast 15. Lighter winds on Thursday with southerlies of 15 knots along the coast on the south side, north side, southeast 20. Central northern inside waters, south to southeast breeze at 10 knots, 2-foot seas. And Clarence Strait, southeast to 20 with 5-foot seas. And for Prince William Sound, northeast winds tomorrow, 20 knots, 4-foot seas. Still carrying gales for the eastern North Gulf Coast, 35-knot winds, 17-foot seas. And 30 knots out of the northeast for the western North Gulf Coast, and those 30-knot winds turn northerly for the Barren Islands. And small craft advisories, southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay, north winds 25 knots. North of the Forelands, though, north winds will be 20 knots. And northeast 15 for Cook Inlet on Thursday, northwest 20 for Kamishak Bay, small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, northerlies at 25. East 25 for the North Gulf Coast, and Prince William Sound, northeast 20, with those winds blowing right on down along the coast of the Kenai Peninsula. And for Shelikof Strait tomorrow, lighter winds, still small craft advisory zone, northerlies at 25 knots, and the east side of Kodiak northwest at 30 with a few higher gusts. Northwest winds 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula with 10 to 11-foot seas, and Bristol Bay looking at northerlies at 20 knots. For Thursday, north at 20 for Bristol Bay and across the Alaska Peninsula. Small craft advisories, Pacific side, top side though, northwest at 20, and 25-knot winds right up, well actually from Cape Sarachev up to Sitkinak, out of the northwest, and up the east side of Kodiak Island. Shelikof Strait down now to 15 knots from the northwest. On Alaska Island for Wednesday, northwest 25 knots, 7 to 10-foot seas. Unmak Island coming down to 15 knots out of the north, 8 Akanatka, northeast 10 to 15. And Amchitka east at 20, Shimianatu southeast 15. And for Thursday, swinging those winds around to the west-northwest, 15 to 20 knots there west of Adak. Central Aleutians west-northwest at 15, so much lighter winds, or light winds continue. And for eastern Aleutians, 15 to 20 knots from the northwest with 4 to 7-foot seas. Southwest coast, small craft advisories, 25 to 30 knot winds. From the north, strong to south of Nunivak Island, where seas will be 8 feet. Northwest 20 for the Pribilofs, northwest 15 for St. Matthew Island. Northerlies at 20 knots, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island. And then for Thursday, north winds 15 to 20 knots there, actually stronger in Norton Sound than they will be for St. Lawrence Island. And then 20 knots along the Yukon Delta coast, northwest 25, small craft advisories, Kuskokwim Delta coast. Variable to southeast winds for the Pribilofs at 10 and north 15, St. Matthew Island. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, north to northwest 15 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet, and north at 10 for the central coast, northeast at 10 knots for the west side all the way down to Cape Thompson, and then 15 knots to Wales. And 20 knots from the north, Wales to Cape Thompson, and then Cape Thompson up the west side there, northeast at 20 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet, central coast, northeast 15, and that extends for the east. That's forecast is good for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast as well, northeast winds 15 knots. And for tonight, winter weather advisory there in the southeastern Brooks Range, east of the Dalton Highway, possibly as much as 4 to 8 inches of snow is in the forecast, but less than 2 inches along the Dalton Highway itself, and there'll be kind of a wet, sloppy snow everywhere else that gets it. And otherwise, south of the Brooks Range stays dry with variable clouds, and rain continues to try to push into the Copper River Basin and into maybe the southern Susitna Valley. But the heaviest stuff will push in toward the Panhandle and remain along the North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, for the day Wednesday, wet and windy for the Panhandle, less wind and rain for Kodiak Island and the North Gulf Coast. Still some sunshine in the interior and diminishing precipitation up along the Brooks Range. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.